Jake's breath steamed in the crisp morning air as he jogged along the narrow dirt trail winding through the dense woods near the lake. His loyal dog, Shadow, a sleek black German shepherd with alert amber eyes, trotted beside him, ears perked and muscles taut. The forest was still waking up, the first pale light filtering through the tall pines, casting long shadows on the ground. Jake had made this run a daily ritual, a way to clear his mind, to find solace in the quiet after years of service that had left his soul battered and restless. The rhythmic pounding of his feet on the earth and Shadow's steady panting were the only sounds accompanying him. As they neared the water's edge, Shadow abruptly stopped, his body stiffening. His low growl rippled in the stillness, and then he bolted forward, barking sharply. Jake skidded to a halt, eyes narrowing against the morning chill. Ahead, the lake's placid surface was disturbed by frantic splashes. Without hesitation, Jake surged forward, adrenaline sharpening every sense. He caught sight of a young woman thrashing just beneath the waterline, bound tightly at her wrists and struggling desperately to stay afloat. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Without a second thought, Jake dove in, the cold shock of the water biting through his running clothes. His hands found the woman's arms, slick and trembling, and he pried at the ropes with practiced strength. Shadows of panic flickered in her eyes as he pulled her toward the surface, breaking through just as her head bobbed above the water with a gasp. His arms locked around her as he kicked toward the shore, muscles burning but driven by instinct and urgency. Once on solid ground, Jake eased the girl onto the grass, turning her gently on her side as she coughed violently, spitting water. Her breaths were ragged but steadying. She was young, no older than mid-20s, with tangled dark hair plastered to her pale face and eyes wide with terror and confusion. Jake's heart tightened at the sight. The fear was raw and immediate, as though the nightmare had only just ended, but the danger remained close behind. Shadow, now calm but watchful, circled the perimeter, nose to the ground, sensing threats invisible to Jake. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small first aid kit, hastily cleaning the cuts and bruises visible on her arms and neck. She flinched but did not resist the care, her gaze flickering between Jake and the dense tree line beyond. Jake's mind raced. This wasn't a random accident or misfortune. The bindings, the struggle, it screamed of something darker, something deliberate. He scanned the woods for any sign of pursuers, but all was quiet except for the gentle lapping of the lake's water. He spoke softly, his voice steady but gentle. "You're safe now. I'm Jake. What's your name?" The woman's lips parted, but no words came at first. Then, in a hoarse whisper, she replied, "Emma." Jake nodded, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Emma, you're safe here. We're going to get you some help." She looked away, shivering despite the morning sun beginning to warm the earth. Jake could feel the weight of her silence. The story she carried was locked tight, a fortress of fear and pain that would not yield easily. He helped her to her feet, supporting her weak frame. Shadow brushed against her legs, a silent sentinel offering protection. Jake led Emma through the trees to the small cabin he had built years ago, nestled deep in the woods, miles from the nearest road. It was a place meant for solitude and healing, a refuge from a world that had never been kind to him or those he cared for. Inside the cabin, Jake lit a fire in the stone hearth. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the wooden walls, creating a warm cocoon against the chill outside. Emma sank onto a threadbare couch, her body trembling. Jake fetched a blanket and draped it over her shoulders. He kept his tone calm and low as he tried to piece together the fragments of what had happened. Do you remember how you got here? Who did this to you?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head, unable or unwilling to speak. Jake sat beside her, giving her the space she needed while silently vowing to protect her. Shadow settled at her feet, his presence a silent promise that she was no longer alone. The cabin was sparse but functional. A small kitchen, a makeshift medical corner, survival gear neatly arranged. Jake moved with practiced efficiency, checking his supplies and preparing to tend to any wounds Emma might reveal in time. His own body ached from years of combat and loss, but his mind was razor-sharp, fueled by a determination that had never dimmed. Outside, the lake shimmered quietly, the morning mist lifting slowly under the rising sun. The wilderness around them held secrets, but Jake's instincts told him this was just the beginning. Emma's ordeal was part of something far worse. A shadow lurking beneath the surface of this peaceful place. As Emma's breathing steadied, Jake glanced at Shadow, whose ears twitched at every distant sound. The dog's alertness was a warning that danger had not yet passed. Jake's jaw tightened. He was no stranger to threats, but this one felt personal, a call to action that stirred something deep within him. He reached out, placing a steady hand on Emma's shoulder. "You're safe here for now, but we need to figure out what happened and who's after you. I promise I won't let anything happen to you." Emma met his gaze, a flicker of hope breaking through the shadows in her eyes. It was fragile, but it was there. The first spark of trust. Jake sat back, watching the firelight play across the room, mind already racing ahead. The quiet lake, the remote cabin, the early morning stillness, all of it was about to be shattered by truths that refused to stay hidden. Outside, Shadow growled softly, ears pinned forward. The woods held their breath, waiting. And Jake knew he was ready for whatever came next. The fire's warm glow filled the cabin, wrapping the room in a comforting haze as Emma's eyelids fluttered open, her breathing shallow but steady. Jake sat nearby, his posture relaxed but vigilant, eyes scanning the shadows beyond the hearth. Outside, Shadow rested by the door, ears twitching with every distant sound, a silent guardian in the quiet woods. Emma's gaze drifted around the modest cabin, the rough-hewn wooden walls, the flickering flames, the sparse furnishings. But her eyes held a flicker of disorientation, as if tethered somewhere between confusion and fear. Her skin was pale, traces of bruises and cuts marking her arms, remnants of the struggle she'd endured. Jake leaned forward, his voice soft yet firm. "You're awake. How are you feeling?" She blinked slowly, her lips parting just enough to whisper, "Where am I?" "Safe," Jake said, offering a small, reassuring smile. "This is my cabin, out in the woods near the lake. You were in the water, tied up. I found you and brought you here." Emma's eyes widened as faint memories trembled at the edges of her mind. She tried to sit up but winced, clutching her side. Jake was immediately at her side, steadying her with a strong, careful hand. "Easy," he cautioned. "You're hurt. Looks like you've been through hell." Her breath hitched as she tried to push past the fog clouding her thoughts. I don't remember how I got here. They said they'd come back." Jake's gaze hardened, his jaw tightening. "Who said that? Who are they?" Emma's eyes darted to the cabin's windows, as though expecting shadows to slip through. She swallowed hard, struggling to find the words. "Men. They took me. I don't know why. I was somewhere else. I don't know where." Jake absorbed every word, the pieces of a darker puzzle beginning to take shape in his mind. "You're safe now. I'm going to help you. First, we need to get you patched up properly." He stood and moved to the small medical corner, pulling out clean bandages, antiseptic, and a bottle of painkillers. Emma watched silently, her body tense but still, the fear lingering beneath the surface like a storm waiting to break. Jake's hands were steady and gentle as he cleaned the fresh wounds on her arms and neck. He worked methodically, the quiet swish of cloth and the faint scent of iodine filling the room. Emma flinched at the sting but didn't pull away. Shadow shifted closer, nudging her hand with his nose, a grounding presence in the swirling confusion. Jake's voice dropped to a calm murmur. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice trembling. "I don't know who I can trust." Jake nodded, understanding the depth of her fear. "I get that. But you can trust me. I'm not going to let anything happen to you." For a moment, silence stretched between them, fragile but charged with unspoken understanding. Emma's breathing slowed, the tension in her body easing just enough to let exhaustion take hold. Jake fetched a glass of water and helped her sip it, then guided her gently to lie back down on the worn couch. Shadow curled at her feet, his steady breathing a balm in the dim cabin. Jake settled into a chair nearby, watching over her with a protective intensity born from years of battle and loss. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a mission, a promise. The hours passed quietly. Emma remained mostly silent, her eyes often closed, but occasionally she would watch Jake as he moved about the small space, preparing a simple meal or checking the perimeter outside. Her gaze was wary but curious, testing the boundaries of safety. Jake found himself watching her more closely than he expected. She was fragile, yes, but beneath that fragility something else lingered. A quiet strength, a flicker of resilience that refused to be extinguished. It reminded him of why he'd stayed in this isolated place, why he'd kept fighting even when the world seemed to have turned its back. As the afternoon sun shifted through the cabin windows, Jake finally broke the silence. "Emma, when you're ready, I need to know everything you can remember. Any detail, no matter how small, could help." Emma's eyes met his, hesitation flickering in their depths. She swallowed, then nodded slowly. "I'll try, but it's hard. It's like there are pieces missing. Like someone's erased parts of my memory." Jake's brows furrowed. "That happens sometimes. Trauma can do that. We'll figure it out together." The moment was interrupted by a sudden sound outside, a twig snapping underfoot. Jake's body tensed instantly. He rose, signaling for Emma to stay low. Shadow growled softly, moving toward the door. Jake opened the door a crack, peering out into the dense woods. Nothing but rustling leaves and the distant call of a bird. Still, the tension lingered, a reminder that the danger lurking beyond had not vanished. He closed the door carefully and returned to Emma's side. "You're not alone," he said quietly. "I'm here, and Shadow's here. We'll keep you safe." Emma managed a faint, grateful smile. "Thank you." Night fell slowly, drawing a velvet curtain across the sky. Jake stoked the fire, the flames crackling softly in the silence. Emma rested under the blanket, her breathing steady now, the fear momentarily held at bay. Jake sat in the quiet, his mind racing over the scant clues she'd offered. The bindings, the water, the men, everything hinted at something sinister, something bigger than a simple kidnapping. He remembered the nights in the SEAL teams, the covert missions, the vigilance required to survive. That training now fueled his resolve. He reached for a worn photograph on the mantel, a snapshot of his old team. Smiles faded, but memories vivid. He traced a finger over the faces and then looked back at Emma, sleeping peacefully for the first time. Jake knew this was just the beginning. There were questions to ask, truths to uncover. But for now, in this quiet cabin by the lake, he had one mission: to care for this frightened girl who had been thrown into a world of darkness. And as Shadow lay alert at the foot of the couch, Jake silently vowed to protect her, no matter what it took. The dawn light filtered through the cabin windows, casting pale stripes across the wooden floor. Emma stirred beneath the blanket, eyes opening slowly to the soft rustle of leaves outside, and the steady breathing of Shadow curled at her feet. Jake sat nearby, sipping black coffee, his gaze fixed on the small clearing beyond the porch where the morning mist hovered like a ghost. Shadow's ears twitched, and with a low growl, he nudged Jake's hand, then slipped silently through the open door. Jake followed, stepping into the cool air, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The dog led him along a narrow path skirting the lake, nose to the ground, alert and purposeful. As they rounded a cluster of alder trees, Shadow paused, tail stiffening. Jake crouched beside him, scanning the underbrush. There, half hidden beneath a thick bed of moss and fallen leaves, lay a tangled mass of ropes, frayed, soaked, and unmistakably the same kind that had bound Emma. Jake's fingers brushed the coarse fibers, and his mind raced. This wasn't just a random discard. It was a sign, a breadcrumb left behind by whoever had dragged Emma into the water. He crouched lower, eyes narrowing. Nearby, something caught the light, a small waterproof bag, battered but intact. Careful not to disturb the scene too much, Jake retrieved the bag. Inside, he found a sleek smartphone, its screen cracked but functional, and a small metallic device, cold and smooth in his palm. He pocketed them both, knowing these could be the key to unraveling the mystery. Back at the cabin, Jake set the phone on the table and powered it up. The screen flickered to life, revealing a series of encrypted messages and images, the kind of digital whispers that spoke of secrets best kept in shadows. His fingers moved deftly, bypassing the first layers of security with practiced ease. Emma watched quietly, a tremor of hope flickering in her eyes. "What is it?" she asked softly. Jake glanced at her, then back at the screen. "A phone. Looks like it belongs to whoever took you. There are messages, coded, but I can decrypt most of them. It's definitely linked to something bigger than we thought." He tapped through lines of text and images, coordinates, times, cryptic phrases, and then paused on a photo that made his blood run cold. A group of men, masked and armed, standing near a dock under the cover of night. The caption beneath read simply, "Operation Shadow Lake." Jake's jaw tightened. "This confirms it," he said. "You were caught up in an organized operation. These guys are using the lake area for something illegal." Emma swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "Human trafficking. I heard them talk about it. I think that's why they took me." Jake's eyes darkened. "Then we're dealing with a ring. People who kidnap and move victims through remote places like this." Shadow growled low, as if sensing the weight of the revelation. Jake put a hand on the dog's head, then turned back to Emma. "We need to be careful. If they think you have this phone, or that you escaped, they'll come looking." Emma's body tensed. "Will they find us here?" Jake shook his head slowly. "Not if we stay alert. But we can't just hide forever. We need a plan." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Jake secured the cabin's windows with makeshift locks, moved supplies to a hidden compartment beneath the floor, and checked the perimeter with Shadow, who prowled silently, nose to the ground, ears pricked for any sign of movement. Emma stayed inside, clutching the blanket around her shoulders, her eyes scanning the woods through the window. The fear was still there, but now mingled with a flicker of determination. Jake caught her gaze. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. She nodded, biting her lip. "I have to be." Later, Jake sat at the table, decrypting more messages from the phone. The fragments painted a chilling picture. The traffickers coordinated shipments under the radar, using remote drop points and encrypted communications. The small metallic device he'd found, a GPS tracker, could reveal their routes if he could hack into it. Jake's fingers danced over his portable laptop, pulling up software designed for military intelligence gathering. His SEAL training kicked in. Focus, patience, precision. Hours slipped by as he worked to crack the device's encryption. Emma watched the transformation with quiet awe as the man who had saved her revealed layers she hadn't expected. A blend of warrior, protector, and strategist. Finally, the device beeped softly, mapping out a series of locations clustered around the lake and neighboring forests. Jake traced the points with a finger, noting the patterns. They're using these spots to move people and goods without drawing attention. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. "Is that where they took me from?" Jake's gaze was steady. "Most likely, and it's where we're going to start looking for answers." Outside, the wind rustled the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Shadow stood alert at the cabin's edge, muscles coiled like a spring. Jake turned to Emma. "We need to move carefully. I'll teach you how to watch for danger, how to read the signs. You're not just a victim anymore. You're part of this now, and I'm not letting them win." Emma nodded, a spark of resolve lighting her features. "I want to help." Jake's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. "Good, because this fight's just beginning." As evening settled in, Jake and Emma prepared to rest, but sleep was elusive. Outside, the woods whispered secrets, and Shadow's sharp eyes never closed. The phone lay on the table, a silent reminder that danger was never far. Jake's mind churned with possibilities and threats, but beneath it all was a singular truth. Emma's survival depended on what they uncovered next, and Jake was ready to lead the way. Jake's eyes traced the flickering glow of the campfire against the deepening darkness, its warm light cutting through the chill that had settled over the forest clearing. Shadow lay alert beside him, ears twitching with every distant rustle. Across the fire, Emma sat wrapped in a worn blanket, her gaze fixed on the flames, but her mind clearly elsewhere. The night was quiet, except for the crackle of burning wood and the whisper of wind through the trees. Yet beneath the calm surface, Jake's thoughts churned with memories, ghosts of missions long past. The steady rhythm of the fire reminded him of the countless nights spent crouched in hostile terrain, where survival depended on instinct and training. He glanced at Emma, noting the flicker of determination shadowed by fear in her eyes. "You're doing good," he said softly. "I know this isn't easy." Emma looked up, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "I'm scared, but I want to understand. To fight back." Jake nodded, pushing back a lock of hair from his forehead. "Good, because understanding is the first step. You have to know how to read your surroundings, sense danger before it arrives." He shifted, pulling from his pack a small notebook and a pen, well worn but meticulously kept. "This is how I kept track during missions. Details, observations, notes. It helps keep the mind sharp." Emma reached out hesitantly, taking the notebook. "You really were in the military?" Jake's gaze darkened slightly, memories surfacing. Navy SEAL, years of it. Trained to survive, to protect, to adapt. It's why I jumped into the lake that day without thinking. Emma's eyes widened. You saved my life. He shrugged modestly. Just did what I had to. Now I'm going to teach you what I know. It might save your life again. Over the next hours, Jake began to share the essentials. How to move quietly through the woods. How to spot hidden trails. Signs of recent human activity. He demonstrated how to use natural cover. How to listen for subtle sounds that outsiders might miss. Emma absorbed everything, her fear slowly giving way to focus. Shadow watched her closely, as if acknowledging her growing strength. Jake could see the shift in her posture, the way her eyes sharpened, the steadiness returning to her breathing. Trust your instincts, Jake emphasized. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore it, and always be aware of your exits. Know how to get out if you need to. Emma nodded, clutching the notebook tightly. I want to be ready. Jake smiled faintly. Good. Because we're not just hiding anymore. We're going to take this fight to them. As the fire dwindled to embers, Jake shared flashes of his past, brief glimpses of the missions that had honed his skills. He spoke of the discipline it took to remain calm under fire, the importance of mental toughness, and the value of teamwork. Emma listened, captivated. The stories weren't just tales of combat. They were lessons in resilience and survival. She saw in Jake a man shaped by hardship but unbroken, a protector who had found purpose beyond the battlefield. You've been through a lot, Emma said quietly. How do you keep going? Jake's gaze drifted to the dark sky, stars beginning to pierce the night. You find something worth fighting for? Something to protect. That's what keeps me moving. Emma's fingers tightened around the notebook. Maybe that's why I'm still here. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Exactly. And now, you're not alone. The night stretched on, filled with quiet lessons and shared strength. Jake's military expertise blended seamlessly with his growing trust in Emma, forging a bond forged in adversity. As dawn approached, Jake stood and stretched, the first light painting the horizon pale gold. Tomorrow, we start moving. We follow the trail from the GPS points. It won't be easy. Emma rose, determination shining in her eyes. I'm ready. Jake smiled, a rare warmth breaking through the fatigue. I know you are, and I'll be right there with you. The forest stirred awake around them, the promise of a new day mingling with the shadows of the past. Together, they prepared to face whatever dangers awaited, united by a shared resolve to uncover the truth and fight back against the darkness that sought to consume them. The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy, dappling the forest floor with shifting patterns of light and shadow. Jake adjusted the straps on his pack and glanced at the GPS device clipped to his belt. The coordinates flickered steadily, marking a hidden trail winding deeper into the woods. One Jake had traced carefully over the past days, piecing together the traffickers' clandestine routes. Emma moved beside him, her steps cautious but determined. The weight of the past weeks pressed on her shoulders, but beneath it lay a growing resolve. She carried the small notebook Jake had given her, filled with notes and sketches from their training sessions, a tangible reminder of her transformation from helpless victim to active participant. Jake's voice broke the silence. These trails don't just lead somewhere. They're part of a network. The traffickers use isolated spots, old cabins, hidden docks, abandoned warehouses, to move their victims without drawing attention. Emma nodded, scanning the trees as if expecting danger to materialize at any moment. How many people do you think they have involved? Jake's gaze hardened. More than we want to imagine. This isn't just a small operation. It's a ring, a well-organized network with layers of people making it run smoothly. As they pressed on, Shadow darted ahead, his nose to the ground, alert and agile. Suddenly, he stopped, ears perked, and growled low. Jake motioned for Emma to freeze, his hand raised silently. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. From the underbrush emerged a discarded backpack, weathered and worn. Jake knelt, inspecting it carefully. Inside, he found scraps of torn fabric, a half-empty water bottle, and a crumpled note scrawled with hurried handwriting. Emma leaned in, reading aloud softly. "Move tonight. Dock 7, midnight, keep quiet." Jake's eyes narrowed. They're planning a shipment tonight. People, or something else, moving through the area. Emma swallowed hard, the urgency of their mission crystallizing. We have to stop them. Jake's expression was grim but resolute. First, we gather more intel. Then we find a way to alert the authorities without tipping them off. They continued, moving carefully through the woods, their senses sharpened by Jake's training. As they approached a dilapidated boathouse near the lake's edge, Emma spotted fresh tire tracks in the mud and faint footprints leading toward the water. Jake crouched, examining the tracks. They're recent. Could be the drop-off point. Emma's heart pounded. If we can get evidence from here, we can prove what's going on. Jake nodded. Exactly. But we have to be smart. One wrong move and they'll vanish before we can act. That night, under the cover of darkness, Jake and Emma positioned themselves near the boathouse, concealed by thick brush. Shadow lay silently beside them, his eyes reflecting the faint moonlight. Jake whispered, "Stay close. Watch their movements. Remember everything." Hours passed in tense silence until the distant hum of engines broke the stillness. Shadow's ears twitched as a convoy of vehicles emerged from the shadows, moving stealthily toward the dock. Men in dark clothing unloaded crates and led several captives, shrouded figures with faces obscured, toward waiting boats. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She gripped Jake's arm, eyes wide with fear and determination. Jake signaled for her to stay calm, his gaze fixed on the unfolding scene. He pulled out a compact camera, snapping photos and recording video discreetly. Suddenly, a twig snapped beneath Emma's foot. Heads turned sharply in their direction. The men reached for weapons, voices raised in alarm. Jake reacted instantly, pulling Emma behind a stack of crates as gunfire erupted, the sharp cracks echoing across the water. Shadow leapt forward, snarling, distracting one of the attackers. Jake returned fire with precision, covering their retreat. "Run," Jake urged, dragging Emma through the maze of docks and into the forest. Branches whipped their faces as they sprinted, hearts pounding, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. Once safe, Jake pressed the camera to Emma's face. "You did good. This evidence will bring them down." Emma nodded, breathless but fierce. "We have to stop this." Jake's eyes locked on hers, a fierce promise burning in their depths. "We will." The forest lay cloaked in a heavy mist as dawn's first light seeped through the canopy, casting a pale glow over the damp earth. Jake and Emma moved silently among the trees, their breath steady but hearts racing from the night's harrowing escape. Shadow padded close, ever vigilant, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of pursuit. The images captured at the dock burned in Jake's mind. The clandestine operation, the captives, the masked men. It was clear now. They were up against a ruthless network, well-armed and deeply entrenched. But despite the danger, Jake's resolve had never been stronger. Emma's courage had ignited something in him, a fierce determination that this nightmare would end. "We can't stay here," Jake whispered, breaking the silence. "They'll be searching the area. We need a safe place to regroup and plan." Emma nodded, her fingers tightening around the worn notebook she carried. "I trust you. What's next?" Jake's gaze swept the surrounding woods. "There's an old hunting cabin a few miles east, abandoned but sturdy. We can lay low there, set up some defenses, and plan our next move." As they trekked through the underbrush, Jake shared fragments of his military training, how to set improvised alarms, create makeshift traps, and establish secure perimeters. Emma listened intently, absorbing every detail, her confidence growing with each lesson. Arriving at the cabin, they found it weathered but intact. Jake moved quickly, securing doors and windows, stacking old logs to fortify weak points. Shadow patrolled the perimeter, nose to the ground, alert for any signs of danger. Inside, Jake unpacked a small tactical kit, a collection of medical supplies, communication devices, and survival gear. He treated Emma's minor scratches from the chase, his touch gentle but efficient. "We're not just hiding," Jake said firmly. "We're preparing. We'll gather intel, figure out their next moves, and strike back when the time is right." Emma's eyes met his, determination shining through exhaustion. "I want to help. Teach me how to fight, how to survive." Jake smiled, a rare warmth in his eyes. "You've already taken the hardest step, survival. Now, we build on that." Over the next days, Jake's rigorous training pushed Emma beyond her limits. He taught her how to move silently through the forest, how to identify signs of human activity, and basic self-defense techniques. Shadow was their constant companion, his keen senses an invaluable asset. They set up a network of tripwires and noisemakers around the cabin, alert systems fashioned from cans and string. Jake showed Emma how to use a compact radio to monitor frequencies, hoping to intercept communications from the traffickers. One evening, as they sat around a small fire, Jake pulled out the decrypted messages from the phone. "These guys aren't just moving people," he explained. "They're planning something bigger, smuggling high-value military tech alongside human cargo. Dangerous stuff in the wrong hands." Emma's breath caught. Why would they want that? Jake's jaw clenched. Power, money, control. This isn't just trafficking. It's a calculated operation with global stakes. The weight of their mission settled heavily between them, but beneath it was a shared resolve, an unspoken promise to see it through. Suddenly, Shadow's low growl shattered the stillness. Jake snapped to his feet, signaling Emma to stay quiet. The dog's hackles were raised, eyes fixed on the dark tree line. Jake moved to the window, peering into the shadows. A faint glow flickered, flashlights moving cautiously among the trees. "They're close," Jake murmured, heart pounding. "Prepare yourself." Emma nodded, gripping a small knife Jake had given her. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath as the threat drew nearer. Jake whispered into his radio, sending a coded message to an ally he trusted, a contact in law enforcement who had been monitoring the traffickers' network. The response was swift. Backup was on the way, but they needed to hold their position and gather more evidence. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the figures moved closer, oblivious to the traps set around the cabin. Jake and Emma remained hidden, watching, waiting. Suddenly, a rustle triggered a noisemaker, cans clattering loudly. The men stopped, weapons drawn, scanning the darkness. Jake gripped Emma's arm. "Now." They slipped out a side door, moving swiftly through the woods, Shadow leading the way. The night erupted into a chase, gunshots echoing behind them. They darted through the underbrush, hearts pounding, branches whipping at their faces. Jake's training guided them, zigzagging, using cover, staying low. Finally, they reached a clearing where headlights pierced the night. The backup had arrived. Jake signaled the officers, who quickly secured the perimeter. Emma collapsed against a tree, breathless but alive. As the officers moved in to investigate, Jake handed over the evidence, the photos, the device, the decrypted messages. One officer nodded grimly. "This will bring them down, thanks to you two." Jake looked at Emma, pride swelling in his chest. She had come so far from frightened captive to fierce survivor. The night air was heavy with tension, but tempered by hope. The battle was far from over, but for now, they had struck a blow against the darkness. Jake knelt beside Emma, his voice steady. "We're not done yet, but we're getting closer." Emma met his gaze, determination blazing. "Then let's finish this." The night hung heavy over the abandoned lake house, its weathered wooden walls creaking softly in the cold breeze that swept through the overgrown yard. Jake and Emma crouched in the shadows of the dense trees lining the property, muscles coiled and senses sharpened. The faint glow of moonlight illuminated faint tire tracks leading up to the cracked driveway, evidence that the kidnappers had been here recently. Jake scanned the perimeter with a practiced eye, his military training guiding every movement. Shadow sat alert at his side, ears twitching, nose to the ground. Emma's grip tightened on the small knife Jake had taught her to wield, her breath steady despite the tension knotting her stomach. "They'll be expecting us," Jake whispered, voice low but firm. "This place is one of their drop points. If we want answers, we need to be ready for anything." Emma nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'm ready." They moved silently through the underbrush, approaching the back of the house where a broken window offered a possible entry point. Jake gestured for Emma to cover him as he slipped inside, the floorboards groaning underfoot. The stale air inside was thick with the scent of damp wood and neglect, broken only by the distant murmur of voices. Jake's eyes adjusted quickly, taking in the dimly lit interior. In the far room, 6 armed men gathered around crates stacked high, their faces obscured by shadows and masks. They spoke in hushed tones, discussing shipments and schedules, their words carrying the cold certainty of criminals accustomed to operating in the dark. Emma crouched just outside the door, heart pounding. She strained to catch snippets of conversation, piecing together the fragments of their operation. The men talked about next shipment, security tightening, and disposal of loose ends. The gravity of their plans pressed down on her like a weight. Suddenly, one of the men turned sharply, sensing movement. "Did you hear that?" he hissed, hand reaching for a weapon. Jake tensed, signaling Emma to stay still. The tension snapped as the men spread out, weapons drawn, sweeping the rooms with practiced precision. The faintest sound, a creak, a shifting shadow, was enough to draw their attention. Emma's breath hitched as a figure appeared at the doorway, gun raised. Jake reacted instantly, lunging forward with calculated force. A swift strike disarmed the man, sending the weapon clattering across the floor. The others converged, but Jake and Emma moved with lethal coordination. Shadow sprang into action, teeth bared and growling, taking down one attacker with a quick snap. Jake's military training kicked in as he dispatched another with precise strikes, his body moving like a well-oiled machine honed by years of combat. Emma fought beside him, her fear replaced by fierce determination. She slashed at an assailant with her knife, the glint of steel catching the dim light. Despite her inexperience, she moved with surprising agility, each breath steady and controlled. The firefight echoed through the house, a chaotic ballet of desperation and survival. Jake barked orders, guiding Emma to cover and pressing the attackers back. One by one, the kidnappers fell or fled, their plans unraveling beneath the onslaught. As the last man scrambled toward an exit, Jake pursued, tackling him to the ground outside. The struggle was brutal but brief. Jake's strength and training prevailed. Breathing heavily, Jake cuffed the captive and signaled Shadow to stand down. Emma, shaken but uninjured, joined him, their eyes meeting with a mix of relief and resolve. "We've got them," Jake said, voice low but steady. "Now we find out who's really behind this." Emma nodded, the weight of the night settling on her shoulders, but tempered by the fire burning within. Together, they secured the house and called in backup, ensuring the evidence and captives were safe. Outside, the first light of dawn touched the horizon, casting a pale glow over the lake. The battle had been fierce, but the victory was clear. Jake looked at Emma, pride and gratitude shining in his eyes. "You were incredible." Emma managed a tired smile. "I had the best teacher." Their fight was far from over, but in this moment they had struck a decisive blow against the darkness threatening to consume the innocent. The lake house stood silent once more, a fortress reclaimed by those who refused to surrender. Jake's grip tightened around the cold metal of the handcuffs as he dragged the man, the mastermind behind the trafficking ring, into the dimly lit interrogation room. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows on the stark concrete walls. The air was thick with tension, the weight of years of cruelty and deception pressing down on the captive's shoulders. The man's eyes burned with defiance, but beneath the bravado, Jake saw the cracks, the fear of the inevitable. This was the man responsible for Emma's nightmare, the architect of a network that had shattered countless lives. Jake paced slowly, his voice low and measured. "You thought you could hide in the shadows, move your victims through these woods without consequence. But you underestimated us." The captive sneered. "You don't know what you're up against." Jake's gaze hardened. "Try me." Emma sat nearby, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The journey from terrified captive to fierce survivor had been brutal, but now she stood beside Jake, ready to face the truth. The man's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "She's not just a victim. She's a liability." Jake leaned in. "What do you mean?" A flicker of recognition passed through Emma's eyes, but she remained silent, waiting. The man smirked. "She knows too much, and she's got people protecting her. You think this is just about trafficking? It's bigger. Military tech, covert deals, things you wouldn't understand." Jake's jaw clenched. "We understand enough to stop you." The interrogation escalated, the mastermind's walls slowly crumbling under Jake's relentless pressure. Details spilled, locations, contacts, shipments. The extent of the operation was staggering, a web of corruption and greed reaching far beyond the lake. Emma listened, absorbing every word, the pieces of her fragmented past falling into place. The man's vendetta against her wasn't random. It was personal, tied to secrets she had only begun to uncover. The room grew thick with silence as Jake processed the revelations. "You'll answer for every life you've destroyed." The man's defiance faltered, eyes darkening with rage and fear. "You don't know the forces you're meddling with." Jake stood, voice steady. "Maybe, but we know enough to end you." As the interrogation concluded, Emma felt a surge of strength coursing through her veins. With Jake's protection and her own courage, she was no longer a pawn, but a fighter. Outside the room, officers prepared to dismantle the trafficking ring, armed with the evidence uncovered. The mastermind's empire was unraveling. Jake placed a steady hand on Emma's shoulder. "You did good. This is just the beginning, but you're not alone." Emma met his gaze, determination blazing. Together, we finish this. The fight for justice had reached a pivotal moment, and with the mastermind exposed, the path forward was clear. Though fraught with danger, hope burned brighter than ever. The sterile fluorescent lights of the hospital room hummed softly as Emma lay resting on the crisp white sheets, her body still marked by the ordeal she had endured. The bruises on her arms had faded to dull purples and yellows, and the bandages carefully tended by Jake's steady hands were slowly being removed. Outside the window, the sun cast warm beams across the city skyline, a stark contrast to the darkness that had shadowed her life for so long. Jake sat in a chair beside the bed, his eyes never leaving her face. The lines of exhaustion etched into his features spoke of sleepless nights and the burden of their fight. But there was also a quiet pride in his gaze. Shadow lay curled beneath the window, alert even in rest, the faithful guardian who had never left Emma's side. Emma's fingers twitched slightly, and she stirred, opening her eyes to the familiar sight of Jake. A weak but genuine smile crossed her lips. "Hey," she whispered, her voice hoarse but steady. Jake reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "Hey, you're doing great." She shifted slightly, wincing as a dull ache reminded her of the trauma her body had endured. Yet beneath the physical pain was something deeper, a fragile hope that was slowly taking root. Emma's voice softened. "It feels real now, like I'm finally safe." Jake nodded. "You are, and we're not done yet. The traffickers have been dismantled thanks to the evidence we gathered. The authorities are following every lead." Emma's eyes glistened with tears, a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "I never thought I'd see this day." Jake's voice was firm but gentle. "You survived. You fought back. That's more than most can say." The door creaked open, and a detective stepped inside, carrying a folder thick with documents and photographs. "Emma, Jake," she greeted, offering a small smile. "The case is progressing. We've arrested several key members of the ring, and the mastermind is facing charges. Your testimony was crucial." Emma nodded, absorbing the weight of the moment. The nightmare was unraveling, and justice was within reach. Jake stood, crossing to the window. "What's next?" The detective glanced at the folder. "Continued investigations, dismantling remaining cells, and providing support for survivors. It's a long road, but progress is being made." Emma's gaze flickered toward Jake, gratitude shining in her eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you." Jake smiled softly. "You found the strength inside yourself. I just helped you see it." Days turned into weeks, and Emma's physical wounds healed. But the emotional scars required patience and time. With Jake and Shadow by her side, she began therapy sessions, slowly confronting the trauma that had once threatened to consume her. In quiet moments, Emma would sit by the lake, the place where her nightmare had begun, reflecting on how far she had come. The water shimmered peacefully now, a symbol of renewal and hope. Jake often joined her, their conversations filled with plans for the future, plans grounded in resilience and the desire to protect others from suffering, as she had. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting golden hues across the water, Emma turned to Jake. "What made you keep fighting, after everything you've been through?" Jake looked out at the horizon, his voice steady. "Because someone needed to. Because people like you deserved a chance. And because I believe in second chances." Emma smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you for giving me that chance." With Shadow resting at their feet, They sat together in companionable silence. The past no longer a prison, but a foundation for new beginnings. The journey toward healing was ongoing. But with each step, Emma reclaimed her life, fortified by trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond forged between a man, a dog, and the girl he saved. The morning sun broke gently over the calm surface of the lake, casting shimmering ripples of gold that danced across the water's edge. Jake, Emma, and Shadow stood together on the familiar stretch of shoreline where their journey had begun. A place once marked by fear, but now a symbol of hope and renewal. Emma, wrapped in a cozy jacket against the crisp air, looked out over the tranquil scene, a soft smile playing on her lips. She traced the patterns of light on the water, feeling the weight of the past slowly lift from her shoulders. Beside her, Jake's steady presence was a comforting anchor, the man who had saved her not only from the water, but from the darkness that had threatened to consume her. Shadow wagged his tail, nose to the wind, sensing the peace that had returned to this place. He nudged Emma's hand with his cold nose, coaxing a laugh that felt lighter than it had in months. Emma turned to Jake, gratitude shining in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you for everything. You gave me a second chance." Jake's gaze was steady, filled with quiet pride. "You earned it. You fought harder than anyone I've ever met." They stood in silence, the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore, mingling with the distant calls of birds awakening to a new day. The scars of the past still lingered beneath the surface. But here, in this moment, they were overshadowed by resilience and the promise of healing. Emma's voice broke the quiet. "What happens now, for both of us?" Jake smiled faintly, a hint of adventure in his eyes. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. There's strength in that." She nodded, feeling the bond forged through hardship and trust. A bond that had transformed her from a frightened girl into a survivor. Shadow barked happily, breaking the reverie, and Jake reached down to ruffle the dog's fur. "Ready for the next adventure, boy?" Emma laughed, the sound bright and free. "Me too." As they turned from the water's edge, the sun climbed higher, illuminating the path ahead. Together, they walked forward, three souls united by courage and hope, ready to face whatever challenges lay beyond the horizon. The story of a man, his dog, and the girl he saved was far from over. It was a story of resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of faith and friendship. And in the quiet strength of that morning, beneath a vast, open sky, they embraced the future, undaunted, unbroken, and unafraid.